welcome to the Zoom with Our Feet podcast, the pod about learning photography. With me, your host, TMac, a professional photographer and videographer who also happens to be a teacher. Yes, I'm licensed to teach. In this edition of the ZoomPod, California-based Steve Compos of SMC Photography joins me to talk about his passion shooting West Coast sunsets, surfing, and sports. The Zoom with Our Feet photography lab is open. Let's talk to a pro. Steve Compos, welcome to the Zoom with Our Feet podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
How did your photo journey start? How'd you get started in photography?
Well, the actual start probably would have been in high school. Took a class in high school. My dad had a Argus 35 millimeter that was pretty nice, I guess, back in the day. And he showed me a few things, and I took a class, and it just, I don't know, it was just kind of nice to be able to just stop something, take a shot of it, and then be able to look at it and go, wow, I'll never see that again. And it's here in my hand. I don't know. There was a novelty about it. A quick little thing, if I can tell you, in that class, obviously, that was back in the film days, and we had a dark room where you would have to take your completely black. You'd have to take your film out of the camera and put it into a roll so you could stick it in the developer can so it could develop. Well, you practice this, by yourself in the daylight so that you could do it blindfolded, essentially. And I got frustrated and I turned on the light to get it. There goes my roll of film.
Oops.
Which I think probably most people have done at some point or another. But yeah, so I got started back in high school and just really dabbled until the last 20 years or so.
When did you get serious? When did you think I could make this a job?
Back in 2003, I had actually gotten my real estate license. And one of the tasks when I joined a group was to photograph homes.
Yeah.
And I had an interest in photography anyways. And, so that motivated me, and it helped me actually earn a living. So that was good. And, so I've been doing that ever since. But it wasn't probably till I think 2016-ish where I had a good friend who was a sports photographer for a school. And I know that he had an extra camera he was trying to sell as a 5D2. And I picked that up thinking, I need a better camera than a 10D, in 2004 or so. And I had that and a 17-40 lens, and I was off and running for real estate photography. Yeah, so I did that for, probably from 2003 to 2000, to now. I still use that 17-40. And, but now I'm kind of using different bodies now because I have more than one body to use. So
when you were, you had a very specific sort of genre that you started with in real estate. So indoor, outdoor work?
Yes, both.
Both.
Yeah.
And thus the 1740, because that's going to get you all that you need to get.
Yeah.
How did you teach yourself the triangle? How did you begin to understand how they all relate and how they all help you make pictures?
I had at the time I had another friend who I actually encouraged him in his photography career because we were both working on the same color house doing color scanning, and he had delved more seriously into photography, and I thought his stuff was really good. I wasn't really taking photos at that time, but I thought, if you, yeah, your stuff's really good. You seem to have an understanding of stuff, and this is what you want to do. You should go for it, So after a few years of mulling around working with me where he really didn't want to work, he took the plunge and just started doing photography full time. And he was able to make it even to this day. So I asked him, I remember one time asking him, well, what's the average settings you would use, if you're outside or if you're inside? And he basically said, well, if you're inside, use ISO 400, and you probably want to shoot about f8. And then, with the shutter speed of at least like 160 or so, and just start there. So I did that and was like, that's pretty close. So I started working from that angle, doing indoor photography. And then I asked outside, what about the outside? And he was like, you probably want to be maybe f11, and, maybe the same shutter speed and ISO 100 or as low as you can get away with.
So that mentor kind of got you started, and you just figured it out as you went?
Pretty much. I figured it out. I asked some other questions along the way, but I believe at that time, I had a lot of experience in Photoshop since the mid '80s.
Good skill to have.
So I knew how to edit images. I knew how to reproduce color, because this is before digital. So you put this thing on a digital color scanner, drum scanner. You put a transparency, and the essential job was to edit the color, was to reproduce the color digitally. So so I knew what colors made up a flesh tone, what a sky should look like if it had too much magenta, too much yellow. So that kind of training for a lot of years before I actually got into photography only helped me in the editing of photos, and because most of the time things don't look the way they should look straight out of the camera.
That's quite a foundation to start with, even before you start taking pictures, as you already knew post-production, essentially.
Yeah.
How did you transition to sports? When did that happen? How did that come about?
Okay, so I believe it was 2015. I had another friend who was working at a local private school. He was a graduate of that school, and he was essentially their sports photographer, doing all kinds of things for all the printed materials that they would do at that time. And he was going to be out of town this one week in August, and that was the week that he would normally shoot the football team headshots, team shots, senior shots, and such, for the sports app that the school has. And he was going to be out of town, and he asked me if I would, if I could do this for him while he was gone. And I was pretty, I said yes, that I thought I could pull this off. I knew the exposure triangle, so it's like, I guess I could do it.
Right.
So I did that, and it went off well. And he returned, and not too long after, him and his family decided that they were going to head out of state, and so they were going to need someone to replace them. So I kind of inadvertently moved in on that role, and I've been doing that since about 2015, 2016.
You shoot a lot of different sports. I'm I'm really impressed with your work. I love seeing it. I know I've teased you about shooting high school swimming outdoors. I'm from Ohio. That's not a thing. But seeing some of your work and thinking, oh my goodness, he's shooting swimming outside in these bright sunny days, and obviously it looks beautiful, but just having those different venues and having the kind of weather that you do have out there, that is such a benefit, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I actually am impressed on the other side, looking at some of these photographers that are back in the Midwest or back East. And they're shooting in the rain, they're shooting in the snow. And, I don't have protection for my equipment because I don't shoot in the rain. If it's going to rain, or if I think it's going to rain, I'm not taking my gear in the rain. I don't need to, because in 3 days, I could probably shoot the same event in sunny sky. So
just wait 3 days. I love that. The other aspect of your photography that I was dying to talk to you about is surfing and how that came about. I mean that's a thing where you live, but I'm just blown away by some of the work that you do with surfers, how that came about, and then I wanted to kind of get inside how that is the same and yet totally different than some of the sports that are typically photographed.
Growing up in Southern California, we lived in about an hour north of where I am now in North San Diego. I grew up in Orange County. Moved down here when I was about 16, and finished. And then I did my last year of high school down here in San Diego. As soon as we moved down, the people I connected with, the kids I connected with, surfed. So I took up surfing and never got really that good at it. But I'd go out, get up at 5:30, go out just before the sun was up, and go surfing a couple times a week. And I really I've always loved the surf culture. And here in Encinitas, it was dubbed the surf capital of the world, which it's not, but it might be to some. And so the surfing culture itself, I've always embraced, even though I never considered really myself a part of it. And so it's already been with me since high school. How I got into actually photographing surfing, if I look back, I had borrowed from one of my friends a 400 2.8 to do some football. And I thought, I wonder how this would work if I shot some surfers. So I happened to hear about a practice session for USA Surfing, which is under 18 group surfers association that's kind of a feeder group to the U.S. Olympic team.
Oh, wow.
And I heard they were going to be here in Oceanside, just 20 minutes up the road. And so I borrowed that 400 with my 5D Mark II and headed down there, and I had a monopod with me as well, and basically stood at the edge of the water watching these kids and practicing tracking, because I've always used and only ever used single point focus. And so that made me be steady and track the object. And I got home and looked at some of these images, and I was like, okay, light went on. I like this. No, I love this. So since then, if there's any contests. I've shot a couple contests up in Huntington Beach where you might have seen a lot of my stuff is tagged for Huntington Beach, because, you know, if you're out there at a contest for a couple hours, you can get a lot of content. So, and I tend to spread my stuff out. So I'm still posting stuff from 2018. But I just love it. And surfing is probably the favorite thing for me to shoot, because where else can you do what you love on the beach?
Exactly. All right. So then, you know, I think what intrigued me was looking at your work. There's some uniqueness about how you work the triangle differently than, say, myself when I'm shooting soccer. So talk about some of the unique challenges of shooting surfing. You've got white caps breaking. You may have whatever, you could describe it better than I, but I think, just looking at your work, there's a unique quality to how you have to work that triangle to make images. Talk about that.
When I'm doing surfing, it actually, I know there's, how do I want to say this? I'm generally shooting with the 400 2.8. I'm shooting from the beach. And trust me, I've thought about getting a water housing and getting in the water, but that might be for the younger folk that are that really want to get conditioned to be able to do that. And I thought I had high hopes, but I haven't done that yet. And I may, but I haven't done that. So I'm shooting from the beach with the 400 2.8, and it wasn't too long after I started that I was finally able to get a 1DX. I wanted more of a sports camera, more of a solid camera that was meant for action sports. So I got the 1DX2, and I felt like I was in heaven, because here I'm 14 frames a second. I'm shooting raw, and I'm shooting at 2.8, and I'm generally always shooting at 2.8 at about 1600ths of a second at either ISO 100 or ISO 50. Because now I tend to shoot only in the mornings when the sun's behind me, so that the sun is illuminating the wave and the surfer. Nothing against shooting in the afternoon. That's a whole different thing. You can get some really cool shots from that,
Yeah.
but I haven't spent a lot of time purposefully going in the afternoon or the evening. So most of my things are in the day and the morning time. And I can be a creature of habit. And so I know that my triangle works for what I'm looking to do. I don't have to shoot at 2.8. And I know that there are many lenses that can, go 200 to 400 or go up 200 to 600 at f4, f5, f6 or whatever. And I think those are actually probably even a better situation than I have. Being at 2.8, to go to 600 would be pretty cool, because you don't need to shoot at 2.8 of what I'm doing, because the depth of field, where as far as I am, where the surfer is and where the wave is, everything's in focus anyways.
Right.
But if I'm at f4 on a sunny day, I'm still probably shooting at 100 ISO. So there's minimal noise, if any.
Right.
And I'm getting a lot closer.
Yeah.
But because I have the 400 and I'm not looking to get 600, it works for me.
Well, I think even at 1600 shutter speed, you're frozen. I'm seeing water droplets, some of that stuff, and the aesthetic of the movement and catching them. You definitely have a lot of experience shooting surfing because just you become able to anticipate, and I'm sort of referring to my work in soccer. I kind of know how they're going to move, and or can see, it appears to me, how they're going to move, and can anticipate that, and how their bodies are in such a position, arms, feet, and how those hips turn, and the board. It's really, really well done, sir.
Thanks. It's been a lot of fun, that's for sure.
So tell me about your kit. What you mentioned, 1DX, so that tells me Canon, and you've got a 2.8, 400. What else do you have in your kit?
Well, like I said, I have a 10D, which what I started with, and when that died, not too long after I acquired it, I had to change up, so I got the 5D2, which still works.
Oh yeah,
I've shot a lot of up until recently. Actually, I've done all my real estate stuff through that, portraits and landscape. It's a great camera. It's got a great chip in it, and and then I have the 1DX2, which I got mainly for sports. Now I've actually been using that for my real estate. Only
oh wow,
only because I really can't explain why I'm using that, because in the end game, it really doesn't matter what body I'm using for real estate, because the result's going to essentially come out the same. But it does seem to have a better dynamic range than the 5D2. So just out of the camera, the image looks fuller and more balanced than the 5D2. And I can in RAW, because I shoot everything in RAW, I can move those shadows much better with the 5D2 image. I'm sorry, with the 1DX image than I can the 5D2. So it was more of a really no real reason. I didn't need to. I used the 5D2 because I didn't want to use the 1DX and use up the shutter count on my real estate stuff. So
yeah.
I kept shooting with the 5D2, and I'm not sure why I changed. I may go back. I don't know. And a couple years ago, I did get the R5. I got into mirrorless because of landscape,
indeed,
and fine art stuff. Only because of the file size. So, and if you want, we can talk later about the mirrorless thing, but that's what's in my kit right now. I have a 70 to 200 2.8 Mark II lens, and I have the R 15-35 wide angle, and that's all I have right now, I think.
Oh, that's the way to do it. You got wide, medium, and long. How have you used the R5 for surfing?
I have. I think I've used it once.
What'd you think?
I'll be honest. Yeah, the R5, I'm glad I have it, because for the fine art side, landscape, that file size is going to comes in handy for outputting really large files, large prints.
Right.
5D2, which most of my landscape was done with, if it's edited right, you can still do giant images.
Correct.
But I did want to move into the mirrorless aspect. And honestly, I don't really like it for sports.
The mirrorless.
The mirrorless.
Got it.
Now, I've heard that the R3 is a little better through the eyepiece, but with the R5, trying to track an image at the high frame rate, it kind of goes blank. So you lose your vision
Sure.
through the eyepiece.
The blackout.
Yeah, and I don't like that. Even though I do use it for sports as a second body.
My main driver is the R6 II. And then I have an R7 that I use for video. So I came from the 1D Mark IV. I had that machine gun for quite a number of years, and I made the jump in 2019. I don't have an R5. I would love the bigger sensor, but the R6 works just fine. I don't experience the same kind of blackout, so I've not had that. I've not had that problem. But I'm interested in your landscape work, because that was where I was going next. I mean, come on, you live on the West Coast, where there's $1 million sunset every evening. How often do you go out? How is that setup different than sports?
Because I'm so close to the coast, obviously sunsets and beach settings are the go-to because they're easy. I will confess that I'm a lazy photographer. There are so many photographers and images that I just drool over, but I'm just going to have to look at them. I'm not going to have to plan on taking them, just because it can be a lot. So, but the setup or the thinking behind when I want to go out for a sunset is I'm looking for clouds. I'm looking for high clouds, and I'm looking for water to act as a reflector. So a lot of my work doesn't have those components because they're the earlier experimentations of just getting out to the ocean and taking sunset photos. And I like a lot of them. But when I can add some dramatic sky or some cool looking reflections to only accentuate that look, then I'm all over it.
Even better.
Yeah.
What is your favorite genre to work in? Do you have a favorite?
I do. I would have to say right now, sports is my favorite, because when I can finally look at the images and capture even that, 1% and go, that's cool of them. And so it brings me satisfaction to look at them. And that's what keeps me wanting to shoot more. Yeah. Whether someone else likes it or not. I mean, that's what keeps me going, and that's what's fun for me. Originally it was the landscape work. That's what really got me fired up to get out and hone that craft, and hopefully, sell some images, and, and that's happened. But since I've gotten into the sports stuff, that keeps me pretty busy. So my wife and I are being purposeful, because she's kind of nudging me, hey, we need to get back out shooting, because that's time with you, and I'll go anywhere and watch and walk and whatever while you're doing your thing. And so that's a good thing. It's a good thing for our marriage. And so we're looking to do that more. I won't tell you that that I have many images from quite a while back that I haven't even processed, just because that's not high on my to-do list.
Right.
But they'll get done for sure.
All right, everybody's got some favorites, and I feel like every picture has sort of a story that led up to that moment. Talk me through one of your favorite pictures. It could be landscape, could be sports, anything that you work in. So let's talk about a situation where it's essentially an execution question. Because one of the questions I get a lot as a teacher is, well, how did, and a lot of times I tell them, well, I cheated a little bit and I did this, or I talked my way into better access to a picture, right? What's a favorite of yours where all of the things that led up to it kind of stars aligned and you executed one of your favorite pictures? Tell me that kind of story.
Well, it would have to be a surfing photo. I have an image of my subject completely behind the curtain of the wave. It's completely closed, and you can see him through the wave. And I can tell you that, I mean, doing this for as long as I have and being on social media for as long as I have never seen anything like it. And I've gotten a number of comments from surfers and surf photographers where they say the same thing. We've never seen anything like this. So that is probably one of my favorite photos. And it's actually a photo of a friend of mine who found me on social media after like 30 years. He found me, and he is an avid surfer, and he saw that I was taking photos, and he loves to get photos of himself surfing. So our worlds collided, connected, and I've been surfing every time. Most of the time when he goes surfing now, he gives me a call and says, hey, can you go out? And we'll go out at the same time, about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'll go out for an hour, and I'll catch as many waves as we can, and we might catch no waves, we might catch 5 of them. And but to get more about that particular image, it was during COVID. And out here in California anyways, there was a point in COVID where you couldn't even walk on the beach. And if you were on the beach, you had to be moving. You couldn't sit down, you couldn't have lunch, you had to be in motion.
Kind of hard for a photographer.
Yeah. So we took a chance, and I had my monopod, so that made it kind of easy to take one step here, one step there, every now and then, like a dance. And he dropped into probably this 6-foot wave or so, and completely got barreled. And, I had the sequence shot and just picked that one shot where it looked like the wave was completely closed. But he said he was in there dry as a bone.
Yeah.
And titled that one Self-Quarantine. So
That's awesome. Okay, so now it's a last couple of questions. We'll pay it forward. If you were going to talk to, and I'm sure that you do, we all do. We meet the kids at the games, and they're just starting out. What are some tips that you have for aspiring photographers? It doesn't have to be technology. It could be something else. It could be both, combination. But what do you tell aspiring photographers that they should be doing, that they need to do, that sort of?
A few things I tell them is, one, take a lot of pictures. Take a lot of photos. The odds that you're going to get one that you really like only increase. We're really fortunate now that we can shoot so many frames per second. And although I don't tend to hold my finger down on the trigger for 2 or 3 seconds, you can get a lot of images. And even at an event, you might shoot 1,500, even 2,000 images. And as you're starting, you're probably going to like a lot more than you're going to like 5 years from now. But keep shooting. Just shoot a lot. Pick the ones you like and learn how to edit them, because editing is half the game. I mean, I see a lot of really cool images where the editing, it needs work. If they would edit it
Just a little, just
appropriately,
horizon,
yes,
just a
yeah,
little.
horizon, things like that.
Yeah.
And obviously cropping for composition, that helps too. And even if I know, I think there's kind of a stigma where you might, at least I've found that sometimes I'll post an image that is cropped in pretty good. And I like the composition, and it's not all chowdery. It's not all chewed up. But if you're going to take two fingers on your phone or on your tablet and enlarge it, which the only reason you would do that is to see all the chowder, you're not going to like it.
Right.
But don't be afraid to practice with your cropping and your composition. And the biggest thing would probably be get on YouTube. You have a question, get online and get the answer. And look at other people's stuff and go, I like that shot. How are you going to get that shot? Where were they when they took that shot? What were their settings?
I can't tell you how many times I go, what? Well, okay, you like that photo. What were the settings? And they kind of, my students sometimes will look at me and say, like, man, got to know the settings. Because if you know, you're like, well, wait a minute, why is he kind of thing? And you could start to have context to what people are doing. What is your post-production tool of choice? You mentioned Photoshop earlier. Are you still using Photoshop only? Do you use Lightroom? Do you use Bridge? Something else other than Adobe? What's your post-production workflow?
I've been in Lightroom the whole time that I've really been on. Been in the sports aspect of it. So since then, obviously all my work, everything is done in Lightroom now. So Lightroom definitely would be the first step in importing into Lightroom. And then just going through, and I go through with finding the images that I think potentially could be worth keeping. And obviously I've gotten a little faster at that, but I'll still go back and forth with, or look at the same image for way too long, and end up not keeping it. But essentially I'm just scrolling through, tagging them number one as the ones I want to keep. And out of 1,500, there might be 80.
Right.
So I'll go, there might be 80. So I'll go into that 80 and I'll start untagging them. Which ones or between these three, this one's the best. So I get rid of 2 of them. So my goal is to get down to 40 or less. I'm still working on getting down low. But it's really hard to delete an image, any image, let alone something that is probably a good image, but you think you might have something better.
Right.
So that's the workflow of culling. I think it's kind of a weird word, but I think that's what they call it.
Yeah.
And then I'll do whatever editing I can do in Lightroom globally first. That might be initial sharpening, color balance, those kinds of things, saturation, contrasts, things I can, and I might just go through a group of 5 and then sync those settings and just do those 5 because they're very similar, because the lighting's different.
That sequence, you got 5 or 6, you could do one and sync them all.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I probably do one thing that I think a lot of people might not do is, Photoshop is my next, I'll edit that final image in Lightroom and I'll bring it into Photoshop, and I'll add a step of sharpening at 1 pixel and 100%, and you can just see it just goes bing, and I love it. So that's what I do. And then I'll adjust the levels and bring the range in where I can, mostly in the highlights.
Yeah.
Because I like my images bright, not brightened.
No,
but I like them bright because even in a overcast day,
drive the highlights a little bit.
You can bring that highlight in a little more than you're used to, even if you're clipping a little bit, especially in surfing.
Yeah, true.
That wave has a lot of range from really high highlights to your quarter tones and midtones. And my focus isn't necessarily the whitewater. It's the wave itself and the surfer. And if the image can look bright and some of those really those highlights are blown out, that's fine with me. As long as the whole whitewash isn't blown out, and that's just that's overexposed,
Yeah.
That's my workflow.
I love the idea of posting the post in Photoshop. So the guy hasn't gone very far from Photoshop, and it's almost like that's your finishing tool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Steve, I can't thank you enough. Your work is tremendous. Steve and I happen to be on the same sports Facebook group. That's how I came to know his work. And I took one look at your surf stuff and said, I got to talk to him. So I can't thank you enough for joining me today.
It was a pleasure, Tim. Thanks for inviting me. And I hope this helps somebody.
Thanks again to professional photographer Steve Compos. Check out his amazing work at stevecomposphotography.com and all of his social media channels. The Zoom with Our Feet podcast is a production of TV Commando Media. Be sure to take a peek at the blog and other episodes of the ZoomPod at ZoomWithOurFeet.com. The ZoomPod theme is by Novembers and their funky groove, Cloud 10. Until next time, photographers, if you're not shooting, you're not learning.